What's going on, everybody? Thanks for hanging out with me today. And today we are talking about how to turn a regular old deep freezer into a whenever you want it 24/7 on the call ice bath. First things first, let's go through the items you're gonna need to go out and purchase before you start this endeavor of turning a deep freezer into an ice bath. Obviously, the first thing on that list is obviously go out and buying yourself a deep freezer. Pretty obvious. I have myself a Frigidaire deep freezer. It's about 20 cubic feet. It's actually pretty big. You don't need one this big. This thing can probably hold 2 people or 4 hobbits, depending upon who gets in it. I would honestly recommend going off and getting one used. So going like a buy, sell, or trade, or kind of like a Craigslist and finding one that's used. You don't need one that's completely new. So now that you have a deep freezer, let's go through the items you're gonna need to go purchase at like a hardware store to continue the project. I'm gonna go through these more in depth later of why you need them, but you're gonna need some kind of like waterproof sealant. You're gonna need some plumber's tape. You're gonna need a temperature gauge. You don't need a temperature gauge gun, but obviously it's cooler if it's a gun. You're gonna need some kind of wall mount, plug-in, kind of like wall timer. This is an optional purchase, but maybe like some kind of water pump. A really small horsepower, like small pool pump is an optional purchase. Now that you bought your items, we're gonna move on to step 1. And step 1 of turning your deep freezer into an ice bath is waterproofing your deep freezer. Now you might be asking yourself, well, isn't it already meant to be waterproof? And it's actually not, because a deep freezer is meant to obviously freeze items, and so it's not really meant to hold liquid items. It might be waterproof to some kind of degree, like it might be waterproof to a degree, very somewhat, but it's not meant to hold water for like extended, prolonged periods of time. So the 2 items that I went out and purchased in order to waterproof it is, I have Flex Seal. You can honestly go out and buy any kind of waterproof sealant that adheres to metal. And so in this case, I brought Flex Seal. It doesn't really matter what you buy, as long as you go to like a Home Depot or a Lowe's and make sure you kind of tell them what you're doing so they can give you a really weird look, and then they'll probably give you an item that'll be similar, if not the same thing. Make sure when you apply this, you apply it and you're obviously not gonna put water in it for 24 to 48 hours. It needs time to settle, it needs time to harden, and it needs time to, make sure it's waterproof. You will spray this pretty much at the corners or at the faces, any place in the unit where 2 faces meet. So any corner or edge or anything of that nature. The next thing you should have already purchased that's gonna waterproof this unit is plumber's tape or sealant tape. And the purpose of that is you should have a drain inside the unit, some kind of like plastic screw-in. And so you're gonna unscrew that plastic screw-in and you're gonna place this tape, this plumber's sealant, around the threads of that drain. And the purpose for that being is the drain itself might be waterproof to a degree, but again, it's not meant to hold water or liquid for a prolonged period of time, and so that's the purpose of that, is to make it more waterproof than it already is. I know in my unit, there's actually a drain inside, and there's a drain on the outside. So I actually put sealant tape on the inside drain and the outside drain, so it's pretty waterproof. Step 2 in the process of turning your deep freezer into an ice bath is filling your unit. And like I said in the previous step, make sure you give your water sealant that you placed inside the corners and faces of the unit, make sure you give it enough time to harden up or do its due diligence to make sure it is waterproof. So if it says, hey, it takes 24 hours, maybe give it a little bit more time, because you really need to be careful. So for instance, my unit is outside, so if it does leak water, it's still gonna be a pain, but if it does leak water, I need to drain it and then reapply it, or figure out why it's not waterproof, and reapply the stuff to make sure it is waterproof. But if you have your unit inside the house, that's a whole nother issue, because now you filled it up with water and it's really stinking heavy, and now you've got a leaking unit inside your house. So really do your due diligence and give it enough time to make sure it's waterproof, and make sure step 1 is really fully complete before you start filling your unit. One kind of option that I actually did was I didn't just stick a hose in the unit and run it on full speed and walk away. I actually filled it with a couple inches, and then let it sit, and I actually stopped the water flow and just watched it because I want to see if there was any leaking water from a couple inches. And if I was safe with that, then I did a couple more inches, and then a couple more inches. Because I want to make sure that it wasn't, you know, maybe the bottom 2 inches of the unit was waterproof, then, you know, maybe inch number 4 or inch number 6 was not. I didn't do a good job, and then I can find it at that point and fix it. So step number 2 is filling your unit. So I would say go through it really slow. Make sure you fill it up pretty slow with obviously just a hose, whatever you have available. One way of speeding up the process of filling the unit and making sure it hits your temperature you want faster is put some ice in it. So when you fill up your unit, go out and buy a couple bags of like couple 20-pound bags of ice. I think I had 40 pounds worth of ice. And so I filled my unit up to the desired level I wanted. I think I wanted it at hip level because I didn't really care about anything above my hips. And I dumped a bunch of ice in there. And the purpose of that being is it speeds up the temperature process to attain the temperature you want. It's probably going to take 24 to like 48 hours for your unit to cool the water, the tap water, to the temperature you want. But if you throw ice in there, it'll speed up the process quite a bit faster. Step number 3 of turning your deep freezer into an ice bath is getting the right temperature in your ice bath. So at this point, you've waterproofed your deep freezer and you've filled your deep freezer with water, and optionally, you've also thrown some ice in there to maybe speed up the process. Now, in the beginning, when you plug the unit in, it's just gonna wanna run forever. And what people don't understand is that this is a deep freezer, and like the name implied, it is meant to freeze everything inside of it. I don't know of a unit out there might be one, but the one I bought does not have the ability to really change the temperature too much. It's meant to freeze items. It's not meant to keep them at like 45 degrees or 50 degrees. It's meant to go below 32 degrees Fahrenheit and stay there. So, if you plugged in your unit and you left and you just let it run for a couple days, it's gonna freeze your water. Your ice bath is gonna become an ice block, and it's not gonna be really usable unless you wanna skate on it. So, you're gonna need to find some way of letting the thing run for a certain amount of time during the day and then turn off during a portion of the day in order to keep the water at a steady temperature and not just freeze it completely. And that's where your timer unit comes into. And you should have purchased this, and you can purchase it at like a Lowe's or a Home Depot or some kind of hardware store. Now, if you walk in there and say, I want a wall timer, they might not know what you're talking about. So the best way of defining it is saying, hey, I need some way of adjusting and keeping my Christmas lights on during the night and off during the day. What can I use to do that? And they usually point you in the direction of something like this, because most of the time people use this for like Christmas trees or Christmas lights on their house. But now we're going to use it for a deep freezer. And essentially what it is it's got itself like a little clock around, a little dial clock. And it's got these little things you can like push in or pull out. And what that's meant to do is it allows you as the user to choose when an electrical current flows through it and it's on or it's off. And so this is going to come really helpful in order to determining when this thing's on or off, because instead of manually coming down here like unplugging it and then plugging it back in, you have the ability to just set it and forget it, essentially. So for me, when you first fill the sucker, you're going to want to leave it plugged in and leave it on the whole time in order to get to your desired temperature. And your desired temperature, I would probably guess, should be around 45 to 55 degrees, depending upon what your goals are, how cold you want it. That should be kind of the range it's in. So as soon as you get to 45 or 55 degrees, then that's when this comes into play. I know for me, I let it run until it reached my desired temperature. And now I run it about 2 hours at night at around midnight, and then 2 hours in the middle of the day. So pretty much 4 hours total will allow me to keep this around 45 to 55 degrees. Now, the other thing that plays into it is the idea of where your ice bath or deep freezer is located at. So for me, it's located outside, like in the elements. So during the summertime, it's really hot, it's really humid out here in Kansas. And so I might need to keep this thing running a little bit more than normal than when the winter comes. When the winter comes, it might be so cold outside that I don't need to even run this as much, if not maybe 1 hour a day. But also take into consideration if you have this in your house. So for instance, if I put this in my basement and it's air conditioned, I might need to run it less because it's being air conditioned, it's in a controlled climate environment, and it's not outside in the baking sun and the heat. So to keep that in mind, there's a couple different variables at play in it. When it comes down to it, it's going to be a trial and error. you're gonna need to like, okay, that's too cold because I'm forming ice bricks in the bottom of my deep freezer. Maybe that's too hot because now my temperature is a little bit higher. And the way of obviously checking your temperature, like you should have purchased, is just a thermometer. You can find one that floats in the water. You know, that's really cheap. This one was like 20 bucks. It's just an infrared thermometer gauge. I point and pull, and it tells me the temperature where it's at. So that's how you're going to determine and get the right temperature in your deep freezer ice bath, is using this timer in conjunction along with the thermometer. Step number 4 of turning your deep freezer into an ice bath is the concept of cleaning it and draining it. When it comes to cleaning it, I've heard of some people doing this. I haven't really researched it a whole lot, but it's obviously, if you have water in this thing, you have the ability to treat it. Like, you know, chlorinate it or keep it clean, and essentially treat it with chemicals. Of course, if you do treat it with chemicals, it's also going to affect the freezing point and the temperature point of your water. Therefore, you're gonna need to like play around with how cold it is and how many hours you run during the day. I've decided not to really treat it, partially because I just keep it clean. I just make sure I wash myself off before I get in it, and so there's nothing really in there. I'm not leaving the gym completely sweaty and then jumping in here and putting all my sweat in here also. I do plan on probably draining it and cleaning it probably every 2 to 3 weeks, and it's pretty much just me getting in it, so it's kept fairly clean. So you could probably treat it if you wanted to with chemicals. I'm not gonna do it. I'm sure somebody has researched it and done it, and I'm sure there's a way to shock it just like a pool. Essentially treat it just like a pool with a pH level and a chlorine level. Now, we talked about cleaning, let's talk about draining it. So at some point you're gonna think, okay, well this water's disgusting, it's starting to smell bad. Whether you've treated it or not, you're gonna wanna drain it out, or maybe it's smelling kind of mildewy or whatever the case may be. So, of course, when it comes time to draining it, you have a couple different options. If you put it in your house, it's gonna be really heavy, right? If it's like say it's in your basement or something, it's filled with water, so it's gonna be really, really hard to get it out. And that's when I would recommend this optional purchase I talked about, and that's kind of a pool pump. A really low horsepower pool pump. This probably cost me like 70 bucks. I think it's like it's like a sixth of a horsepower at Home Depot. And essentially what it does is you plug it into an outlet, and then there's a little hose mount here where you attach a hose to it, and then you can put it in the unit itself, sink it in there, plug it in, attach a hose to it, and it'll slowly pump water out. Then make sure you get a long enough hose, that way you can drain the water out in your lawn, or maybe if it's in your basement, you drain it out into your sunk pump, and then your sunk pump kicks it out of your house. So you have a couple different options. That's one way of doing it if it's inside your house. The other way of doing it is a little bit cheaper. If you have it outside, is just get like a couple of 2x4s and put it on the corner opposite of your drain, and then essentially tilt the unit up, unhook your drain, and just drain it out on your lawn or wherever the case may be. And so there's obviously 2 ways of doing it, whether you have a pool pump, which is what I have because I think it's a lot easier, or you have a couple 2x4s, you elevate it and drain it out the other end. So the next thing I want to cover is how I use my ice bath and why I do it. What's the purpose behind it? You know, why should you use an ice bath? Why is it an idea? Why do people do it? And the main reason behind it is inflammation, right? It limits the inflammatory response of your body. So, you know, a prime example would be like when we did the ruck run this year at the games, when we had to run that like 4 miles up to like 50 pounds on our back, my legs were completely shot. And there's a lot of research done on this, and there's obviously 2 sides to any argument. You know, some people say ice baths work with inflammatory responses. Some people say it's just a waste of time, it's just in your head. It obviously comes down to how you feel about it. You know, my thought process is, if I get into an ice bath and then I get out of it and my body feels better, then I will perform better because it's a mental thing, right? So for me personally, I like it. At the end of a day, or after a really hard leg workout, or really hard arm workout, or really hard whatever kind of workout, it allows me to lower my body temperature really quickly, right? It limits my inflammatory response in my body and inflammation in my joints, or whatever the case may be. And to be honest, I use it a lot at night because when I get done and I'm just like really cold, it just feels really good to go take a quick shower, you know, jump in my pajamas and jump into bed, and I sleep really, really well. And to be honest, like, even if that was the only benefit, Even if the only benefit was it allows me to sleep better at night, well, we all know that sleep is like the #1 thing for recovery for your body. So if it helps me sleep better, then that already is an added benefit that I just can't beat. So that's some of my reasonings and the reasonings I use in ice bath. To be honest, how I specifically use it is I have an ice bath right here, and then I actually have a hot tub right there, which I'm not going to spin the camera, just trust me, it's sitting right there. And so I actually do about 6 rounds. Let's say like I did a really hard workout that night. I'll come out here in my swimsuit and I will do 6 rounds of 2 minutes in each. I will start with the heat, and so I'll get in the hot tub. So let's say like I'm just worried about my lower body. I will get in the hot tub for 2 minutes. Timer will go off. I'll get in the cold tub, my hips below, for 2 minutes. Then I'll hot tub it and then cold tub. And I'll go back and forth. So 1 hot tub for 2 minutes and then 1 cold tub for 2 minutes, and I'll do that for 6 rounds. And it's honestly really good. By the time end of it, I'm really tired. My body's really in shock. The reason for starting with the hot tub for me is because if I just like walking around and I get in a cold tub, it's really stinking cold and I won't really get in it. But if I get in the hot tub first, my body's like all relaxed and it's really, really warm. It's kind of the hot, kind of my skin is really warm. It almost acts as a barrier to how cold it is in the cold tub. And so I get in the cold tub really fast and it doesn't really hit me really quickly, and it's a little bit easier to do. And also the benefit of it is you should probably always end with a cold tub. You should probably always end with cold therapy, because if you're looking for inflammation, if you have inflammation, if you're trying to combat inflammation, well, the warm, hot therapy won't help, but the cold therapy, you should end with it because that's what's really beneficial to inflammation. So I believe if you go back and forth between hot and cold, it's actually called contrasting therapy or something like that, some kind of wicked scientific name, whatever. I looked it up and that's what I found the best. If you are actually just looking to do cold therapy, let's say you don't have a hot tub. If you don't have a hot tub, you can probably just use like a hot shower. That's an option. But if you don't have a hot tub or a hot shower or whatever the case may be, or you don't want to do it, if you're doing just cold therapy, I don't think there's any benefit to go past 5 minutes. I don't think there's any benefit to go past 5 minutes, and especially go below your heart. I usually stay about chest nipple level below. I don't usually go anywhere above that, and I usually don't spend more than 5 minutes in there because at some point I don't think it really does a whole lot of benefit, and I'm just getting really, really cold and uncomfortable. And that's really it, guys. Those are my easy steps of turning any deep freezer into an ice bath that you can use to combat inflammation or cool down or just be a wild man and sit in an ice bath, whatever the case may be. Anyways, if you guys have any questions or comments or concerns, put them down below. I'll make sure to respond back to you guys. Other than that, thanks for watching and thanks for hanging out. See you guys later. Bye.